Hey guys, tonight we are going to dim the lights and drift back in time. Not to a golden age of enlightenment, but to a rather, shall we say, robust period of learning the Middle Ages. You're snuggled deep under your blankets now, breathing easy. But in a moment, you'll find yourself as a young, aspiring scholar in a world where books were rarer than a unicorn, and a good education often came with a side of pain. Seriously, you probably wouldn't survive the first week. Think less Montessori school and more survival training. If that training involved Latin and getting hit with a stick. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are but a small sprout, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, barely able to tie your own tunic, and certainly not ready for what's about to hit you. Unlike most children of your era, whose days are filled with chasing chickens or toiling in the fields, your path is different. You haven't been born into the rough and tumble life of a peasant, nor are you destined for the squalor of a town's cramped alleys. No, your family, though perhaps not of the highest nobility, possesses enough land, enough coin, or perhaps enough piety to consider a future beyond mere subsistence. This, my dear friend, is your first hint that you are among the infinitesimally small percentage of medieval folk who will ever learn to read or write. It's like being chosen for a highly exclusive, super boring, but ultimately powerful secret club. Only the initiation involves a lot of Latin verbs. Your childhood, such as it is abruptly interrupted. No more afternoons spent trying to catch frogs by the stream. No more sneaking bites of cheese from the pantry. Instead, the smell of fresh parchment and beeswax fills your nose, replacing the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Perhaps your father, a minor lord or a prosperous merchant, has decided you show a promising spark of intelligence. Or, more likely, he plans for you to enter the church, where learning is not just encouraged, but required. This is a common historical fact in the Middle Ages. The church was the primary patron and preserver of education. Monasteries and cathedrals were intellectual powerhouses, hoarding manuscripts like dragons hoard gold, but for a slightly less destructive purpose. So, one brisk morning, before the cock has even thought about crowing, you find yourself bundled up and led away from the warmth of your family home. Your destination, a local monastic school, or perhaps a small private school run by a diligent parish priest. As you stumble through the pre-dawn gloom, clutching a small, roughly carved wooden toy, you might catch a glimpse of other children already at work, their small hands chapped and reddened by the cold. They are not going to school. They are going to labor. And in that moment, you might not fully grasp the profound difference between your fate and theirs. But you will soon, stepping into the schoolroom. You are immediately struck by the cold. Stone walls, damp and unforgiving, absorb what little light filters in through small, high windows. There are no colorful posters, no cozy reading nooks, just rough wooden benches, a single scarred table, and a stern-faced monk or priest whose eyes seem to pierce right through your very soul. This is Brother Thomas, or Father Gregory, and he does not suffer fools gladly. His primary teaching tool that you soon discover is not patience, but a switch made from birch branches. If you thought your math teacher was tough, imagine one who actually hits you for not knowing your multiplication tables. Suddenly, modern education doesn't seem so bad, does it? Your first lessons are not about adding numbers or drawing pictures. Oh no. They are about memorization, pure and relentless. You begin with the alphabet, of course, but it's the Latin alphabet, and you're expected to learn it phonetically, with no understanding of what the words mean. Amo, amas, amat. You repeat it again and again, your small voice echoing in the cold, cavernous room. The sounds are alien, like a secret code you haven't yet deciphered. The purpose of this early rote learning, historians still debate, was it simply the most efficient way to teach a foreign language, or did it serve to humble the young student, instilling discipline before true understanding? Books are precious, hand-copied treasures, often chained to lecterns to prevent theft. You won't have your own textbook. Certainly not. Instead, you'll share a worn copy of the Psalter, or perhaps a basic Latin grammar text. The pages brittle with age and filled with meticulous, tiny script. Your task is to copy, endlessly. You learn to hold a quill, dipping it into ink made from oak galls and iron salts. The scratch of the quill on parchment is the only sound, save for the occasional cough or the sharp crack of Brother Thomas's switch against an inattentive hand. Your fingers ache, your eyes strain in the dim light, and a persistent smudge of ink seems permanently affixed to your nose. It's not quite like having an iPad. Is it more like being forced to hand copy Wikipedia and calligraphy for 8 hours straight? Good luck. You also learn manners, or rather, strict monastic discipline. Silence is golden. Speaking out of turn, fidgeting, or even a misplaced cough can earn you a swift reprimand. Meals are eaten in silence, often while a fellow student or monk reads aloud from the scriptures. Your diet is simple, often bland, designed to keep the body humble and the mind sharp. No sugary snacks or energy drinks here. Just stale bread, thin gruel, and perhaps a small portion of dried fish if you're lucky. You yearn for the warm, comforting meals of your mother's kitchen, but such thoughts are banished as quickly as they arise. One obscure detail about medieval education that might surprise you: some monastic schools practiced what was known as interlinear glossing. This involved students writing Latin translations directly between the lines of a vernacular text, or vice versa, to aid in language acquisition. Imagine trying to learn a language by writing the translation of every single word directly above it in a book you're barely allowed to touch. Sounds like a blast. Right. It was less about creative writing and more about meticulous, often painful, linguistic dissection, as the days turn into weeks, and weeks into months. A faint understanding begins to dawn. The alien sounds of Latin slowly, painstakingly, begin to coalesce into meaning. You learn basic prayers, simple moral maxims, and the rudiments of grammar. You discover that amo means I love, though what there is to love in this cold, stern schoolroom is beyond your grasp. But with each small victory, each new word understood, a tiny spark ignites within you. A spark of curiosity, a flicker of ambition. You are not just memorizing, you are beginning to learn. This is your initial foray into the trivium, the foundational liberal arts curriculum. And let me tell you, it's far from liberal in the modern sense of the word. Your parents visit rarely, perhaps once a year, if at all. Their visits are brief, filled with questions about your progress and stern admonitions to apply yourself. They remind you of the honor you bring to the family, the opportunities that learning will afford you. They talk of the light of knowledge and the path to salvation, but all you feel is the cold stone beneath your feet and the sting of unearned tears in your eyes. You miss the warmth of home, the familiar sounds of your village, the freedom of running through fields. But here, freedom is replaced by discipline and play by study. You are on a different path, a narrow, winding one, paved with Latin grammar and the occasional birch switch. Your early education, despite its harshness, is laying a foundation. You are learning to think, albeit in a rigid, prescribed manner. You are learning to analyze, to dissect, to argue. These are the first shaky steps on a long and arduous journey towards becoming a true medieval scholar. And believe me, the journey only gets awfuler from here. You've made it past the initial shock, haven't you? The smell of damp stone and stale parchment is now a familiar, if not comforting, scent. The occasional crack of Brother Thomas's switch no longer makes you flinch quite as violently, though you still strive to avoid its acquaintance. You are no longer just a small sprout, but a sapling, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, and the foundational lessons of your medieval education have truly begun. This is where you delve headfirst into the first part of the trivium grammar: rhetoric and logic. Spoiler alert, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. Your days unfold in an unyielding rhythm, dictated by the chiming bells of the monastery or the rising and setting of the sun. You rise long before dawn, your breath fogging in the cold air, to attend matins, the first prayer service of the day. Your stomach rumbles with a persistent, dull ache, the thin gruel of the morning barely a distant memory. By candlelight, you return to the schoolroom, where Brother Thomas awaits, his silhouette framed against the single high window. The lessons resume, relentless and demanding. The focus, overwhelmingly, is on Latin grammar. This isn't just about learning to speak a foreign tongue, it's about mastering the very structure of thought, as the medieval mind understood it. You pore over works like Donatus's Ars Minor and Priscian's Institutiones Grammaticae, ancient texts meticulously copied and recopied, often with small, illuminating or confusing marginalia added by previous generations of scholars. You learn about nouns and verbs, cases and declensions, tenses and moods. It's a dizzying array of rules, exceptions, and more exceptions. You conjugate verbs until your voice is hoarse, and decline nouns until your head spins. Imagine trying to learn coding languages, but every single line of code is in Latin, and a syntax error means a literal whack on the knuckles. Your modern brain might scream, "Why isn't there a Duolingo for this?" The method is still largely rote memorization. You repeat phrases and conjugations in unison with your fellow students, a low, droning hum that fills the cold room. Your memory, sharpened by necessity and fear, becomes a vast internal library. But Brother Thomas isn't just interested in whether you can recite the rules. He wants to know if you can apply them. He'll give you a simple Latin sentence and demand you parse it, identifying every noun, verb, adjective, and their corresponding cases, numbers, and genders. A slip-up, even a minor one, is met with a sharp glance, or worse. The air is thick with tension, palpable enough to cut with a dull quill. One common historical fact often overlooked is the sheer physical discomfort of medieval schooling. There was no central heating. Windows were unglazed or covered with animal hide, offering little protection from the elements. Students sat on hard wooden benches, their feet often numb with cold. Ink froze in winter, and quills splintered from overuse. It was a constant battle against the environment, on top of the academic demands. Historians still debate the exact prevalence of physical punishment in medieval schools. While undoubtedly common, some argue it was used more as a disciplinary tool for grave offenses rather than daily instruction, while others contend it was a constant threat. Either way, it wasn't exactly a nurturing environment. Beyond grammar, you begin your tentative steps into rhetoric. This isn't about giving inspiring speeches. Not yet. It's about understanding the art of persuasion, the structure of argumentation, and the subtle nuances of language. You read ancient Roman rhetoricians like Cicero, or at least excerpts of their works, attempting to grasp how they crafted their arguments, how they swayed their audiences. You learn to identify figures of speech, to analyze the flow of a logical argument, and to recognize logical fallacies. Brother Thomas makes you practice constructing simple arguments, often on theological topics or moral dilemmas. It's like learning to write a persuasive essay, but if failing meant convincing the wrong person that the earth was actually flat, and then getting banished for heresy, a slight exaggeration, perhaps, but the stakes were definitely higher than a failing grade on your report card. The third pillar of the trivium is logic, sometimes called dialectic. This is arguably the most challenging, and perhaps the most dangerous part of your early education. Logic is the art of reasoning, of discerning truth from falsehood. You study the works of Aristotle, or at least medieval interpretations of them, learning about syllogisms, propositions, and deductions. You learn how to construct a valid argument and, crucially, how to dismantle a flawed one. Brother Thomas pits you against your fellow students in simple disputations, debates where you must defend a given proposition or attack another's. The verbal sparring is intense, and a logical misstep can lead to public humiliation, or perhaps a more subtle form of social ostracization. Think of it as a medieval debate club, but with much higher stakes for sounding foolish. An obscure detail of medieval logic education, some students were taught topica, a system of rhetorical commonplaces or ready-made arguments that could be applied to various situations. It was essentially a medieval cheat sheet for debates, providing frameworks for persuasion even if the student hadn't fully grasped the deeper philosophical nuances. It's a reminder that even in an age of intellectual rigor, practical shortcuts were still valued. The concepts are abstract, often frustratingly so. You spend hours trying to wrap your young mind around the nuances of categorical syllogisms. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Sounds simple enough, right? But then Brother Thomas throws in a curveball, a logical fallacy disguised as a truth, and your brain feels like it's wrestling with a particularly stubborn knot. Your head aches, not just from the cold, but from the sheer mental effort. You sometimes wish you could just go back to chasing chickens. At least that made sense. Despite the intellectual rigor, physical discipline remains a constant presence. The switch hangs prominently by the door, a silent, ever-present reminder. Minor infractions, daydreaming, whispering, an ink blot on a copied manuscript are met with sharp rebukes and the sting of birch on your palm. It's designed not just to punish, but to instill discipline, to break your will and rebuild it in the mold of a humble, obedient scholar. The idea is that true learning requires a controlled body and a disciplined mind. And let me tell you that discipline sticks. Even after hours of grammar drills, you're less likely to slouch. Your fellow students are a mixed bag. Some, like you, are from families of means, destined for the church or perhaps a career in law. Others are orphans, taken in by the monastery, their futures entirely dependent on their academic success. There's a quiet camaraderie that develops among you, a shared understanding of the hardships you endure. You might exchange furtive glances of commiseration when Brother Thomas's voice rises, or share a rare, whispered joke during a moment of respite. These small connections are your lifeline, a reminder that you are not entirely alone in this arduous journey. But beneath the camaraderie, a subtle competition brews. Everyone is vying for Brother Thomas's approval, for the chance to access more advanced texts, for the faint hope of a brighter future. At night, as you lie on your hard cot, the cold seeping into your bones, you sometimes dream of home, of your mother's warm embrace, the smell of freshly baked bread, the laughter of children playing in the sun. But these dreams are fleeting, quickly replaced by the harsh reality of your monastic cell. The lessons of the day echo in your mind: subject, predicate, mood, tense. You are a scholar now, even in your sleep. And this, you realize with a sinking feeling, is just the beginning. The trivium is only the first hurdle. The quadrivium, the more advanced liberal arts, looms on the horizon, promising even greater intellectual challenges and, quite possibly, more birch switches. You are learning to think, to reason, to persuade, but you are also learning obedience, discipline, and endurance. This education is not designed to foster independent thought in the modern sense, but to create scholars who can defend the established order, interpret sacred texts, and serve the church or the burgeoning legal systems. It's a powerful, if brutal, system, shaping minds to fit the medieval world. And you, my sleepy friend, are right in the thick of it. You've navigated the choppy waters of basic grammar and dipped your toes into the vast ocean of rhetoric and logic. You are now perhaps 11 or 12, your tunic a little shorter, your face a little sharper, etched with the faint lines of constant concentration. Brother Thomas still looms, but his switch, while ever present, feels less like an immediate threat and more like a distant, inevitable consequence. You are deeply ensconced in the trivium, the foundational core of your medieval education, where you truly begin to sharpen your mind into the intellectual weapon it is meant to become. This is where the real grind begins, where you're expected to not just memorize, but to understand, to analyze, and most importantly, to argue. Your mornings are still dominated by grammar, but now with a nuanced intensity that would make a modern linguist weep. You're not just conjugating verbs, you're dissecting entire Latin texts, works by Virgil, Horace, and Ovid, not for their poetic beauty or narrative power, but for their intricate grammatical structures. You parse sentences of increasing complexity, identifying subordinate clauses, gerunds, participles, and ablative absolutes with the precision of a surgeon. Each sentence is a puzzle, and you are expected to solve it, to account for every single word, every inflection. Imagine trying to reverse engineer a complex computer program using only a cryptic, ancient manual, and then explaining every line of code to a stern, unblinking instructor. Your head throbs, but a strange sense of satisfaction blooms when a particularly thorny sentence finally yields its secrets. Is this what fun feels like in the 12th century? Because I'm vaguely enjoying this, you might think, before quickly quashing such a dangerous notion. This mastery of Latin grammar is paramount. It is the key to all knowledge, the lingua franca of scholarship, theology, and law throughout medieval Europe. Without absolute fluency, you cannot hope to advance. A common historical fact, Latin was not just for academic pursuit, it was the language of the church, of legal documents, of diplomatic correspondence. To be educated in the Middle Ages was, first and foremost, to be educated in Latin. This meant a level of immersion that would be unthinkable in modern language learning. Essentially living and breathing the language. Your lessons in rhetoric become more sophisticated. It's no longer just about identifying figures of speech, it's about using them effectively. You study the art of argumentation through the lens of classical texts, learning how to construct a compelling speech or a persuasive letter. You analyze the techniques of persuasion, how to appeal to logic logos, emotion pathos, and credibility ethos. Brother Thomas now demands you compose your own short declamations, arguments on various topics, from the morality of a particular saint's actions to the justification of a feudal lord's tax increase. You learn to arrange your thoughts logically, to choose your words carefully, and to present your case with clarity and force. It's like being forced into impromptu public speaking competitions every other day, with no internet to Google witty comebacks. The pressure is immense, but the satisfaction of a well-constructed argument, of seeing Brother Thomas give a rare, approving nod, is a potent motivator. The culmination of the trivium, and perhaps its most intellectually rigorous component, is logic or dialectic. This is where you truly learn to think critically, to discern truth from falsehood, and to engage in formal disputation. You delve deeper into Aristotle's organon, studying complex syllogistic forms, fallacies, and the rules of valid inference. You learn to differentiate between a priori and a posteriori reasoning, to understand the nature of universals and particulars. It's intense, abstract, and often feels like your brain is being twisted into a pretzel. You might spend an entire afternoon wrestling with the implications of a single logical proposition, your brow furrowed in concentration. Brother Thomas now orchestrates more formal disputations. You and your fellow students, sometimes paired, sometimes pitted against each other individually. Take on roles one is the opponent, presenting arguments against a proposition, and the other is the respondent, defending it. These aren't informal chats. They are structured intellectual duels. You must listen intently, identify the flaws in your opponent's reasoning, and and articulate your counter-arguments with precision and clarity. The pressure is immense, as a logical misstep can lead not just to embarrassment, but to a perceived failure of intellect. It's basically a medieval rap battle. But instead of rhymes, you're dropping logical bombs, and instead of a crowd, you've got a very judgmental monk. An obscure detail about medieval disputations while they were formal academic exercises. They could sometimes become quite heated. Students and masters were known to employ sharp wit, sarcasm, and even personal digs, though technically discouraged in their pursuit of intellectual victory. It wasn't always a purely objective search for truth. Human ego was definitely a factor. Historians still debate whether these public, often theatrical disputations truly fostered independent critical thinking, or simply encouraged mastery of predefined argumentative structures. It's a fascinating chicken and egg question, isn't it? The cold of the schoolroom, the sting of the switch, these are still present. Constant reminders of the physical demands of your education. But now, another kind of pain emerges: the intellectual frustration. The sheer mental exhaustion of wrestling with abstract concepts. Your head aches, not just from the damp air, but from the constant churning of your brain. You sometimes stare blankly at the parchment, the Latin words blurring into an incomprehensible tangle, and you yearn for a moment of silence, like a moment where your mind isn't forced to analyze, like deduce and argue. Your fellow students are no longer just comrades in misery. They are intellectual sparring partners, potential rivals, and occasional allies. You form small study groups, huddling together in the dim light, whispering explanations and quizzing each other on difficult passages. These moments of shared struggle forge a bond, a sense of belonging in this rigorous world. You learn to gauge their strengths and weaknesses, to anticipate their arguments in disputation. There's a fierce, unspoken competition for Brother Thomas's approval, for the chance to be recognized as the most promising scholar, for the subtle privilege of being given a cleaner quill or a slightly less worn manuscript to copy. Your parents continue to hold you to a high standard. Their letters, when they arrive, filled with exhortations to apply yourself. They speak of the honor you will bring to the family, the opportunities that await a learned man in the church or the growing secular bureaucracy. You feel the weight of their expectations, a heavy cloak upon your young shoulders. It's not just about your future, it's about theirs too, and the future of your lineage. You understand that your academic success is a direct investment, and failure is not an option. As you master the trivium, you gain not just knowledge, but a profound shift in your understanding of the world. You learn to see the logical connections between ideas, to analyze arguments with a critical eye, and to express your thoughts with precision and clarity. You begin to understand the complex theological doctrines, the intricate legal codes, and the philosophical underpinnings of your society. This is the foundation upon which all higher learning is built. It's like finally getting your driver's license after years of learning the rules of the road. You're not a master driver yet, but you know how to operate the machine. At night, as the monastery falls silent save for the occasional hoot of an owl, you lie on your hard cot, your mind still buzzing with the day's lessons. Syllogisms dance in your half-sleep. Latin phrases echo in your ears. You are no longer just a boy, you are becoming a scholar. The path ahead is still long and arduous, with the quadrivium, the higher liberal arts of arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy looming on the horizon. But you are ready, or at least you tell yourself you are. The discipline is ingrained, the hunger for knowledge, however painful to acquire, is awakened. You are a product of medieval education, raw, relentless, and undeniably effective at molding minds. You have conquered the trivium. Your mind, once a tangled mess of childish curiosity, is now a finely honed instrument, capable of parsing dense Latin, constructing persuasive arguments, and dissecting logical fallacies. You are now perhaps 14 or 15, no longer a child, but not yet a man. Your tunic might still be a bit too big, but your eyes hold the weary wisdom of years spent bent over ancient texts. Brother Thomas, surprisingly, now looks at you with a hint of something akin to pride. Or perhaps just relief that you haven't given him cause to wield the switch in a while. You are ready to ascend to the next level of medieval scholarship, the quadrivium. This is where the liberal arts truly become higher, delving into the mathematical and scientific knowledge of the age. Prepare for a world of numbers, celestial spheres, and the subtle harmony of the universe, all taught in ways that would make your modern brain spontaneously combust. Your mornings, while still beginning before dawn, now involve a different kind of rigor. Instead of parsing Virgil, you are grappling with the abstract beauty of numbers. Arithmetic, the first pillar of the quadrivium, is your new master. This isn't just about counting your fingers and toes, it's about understanding the properties of numbers, their relationships, and their application in practical calculations. You learn about ratios, proportions, and the basic operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, often using an abacus or counting boards rather than paper and quill. Paper was too expensive for mere calculations. You'd scratch your sums on waxed tablets, then smooth them away to reuse. Imagine trying to do your taxes with a stylus on a wax tablet, and if you mess up, you just smooth it over. No undo button here. The texts you study are often derivations from ancient Greek and Roman works, filtered through Arab scholars and then translated into Latin. You learn the theories of number laid out by Boethius, a Roman philosopher whose works form the bedrock of medieval arithmetic. The focus isn't just on calculation, but on the philosophical understanding of numbers, their divine significance, and their place in the cosmic order. It's less about balancing a checkbook and more about understanding the fundamental building blocks of creation. This is a common historical fact. Medieval mathematics was deeply intertwined with philosophy and theology, rather than being a purely utilitarian pursuit. Next comes geometry, the study of shapes, sizes, and space. You delve into Euclid's Elements, a colossal work of ancient Greek mathematics. Again, accessed through Latin translations, you learn about lines, angles, triangles, and circles. You construct figures with a compass and straight edge on parchment, meticulously proving theorems with logical precision. Brother Thomas now demands not just answers, but proofs. You must demonstrate why a triangle's angles add up to 2 right angles. Not just state the fact. It's an exercise in abstract reasoning, pushing the boundaries of your spatial understanding. It's like trying to build a complex 3D model in your head, then having to write a detailed, step-by-step instruction manual for it. Without any visual aids, your spatial reasoning might get a workout, but your patience will surely be tested. An obscure detail about medieval geometry, while Euclidean geometry was foundational, practical applications often involved surveying land or designing architectural elements for cathedrals. Some students might have been exposed to rudimentary forms of trigonometry, often learned through astronomical texts, long before it became a distinct mathematical discipline. It wasn't all abstract. Some of it was for building really big, impressive, and very pointy churches. Music, the third art of the quadrivium, is not what you might expect. This isn't about learning to play a lute or sing a cheerful tavern tune. This is about the theory of music, its mathematical ratios, its harmonic proportions, and its connection to the divine order of the universe. You study the intervals between notes, the structure of scales, and the principles of consonance and dissonance. Boethius's De Institutione Musica, On the Institution of Music, is your guide, a dense treatise that explores the mathematical basis of harmony. You learn how certain musical ratios correspond to planetary distances, reflecting a deeper, divine harmony. It's less about composing a catchy tune and more about understanding the cosmic symphony. Imagine trying to explain the physics of sound waves to someone using only diagrams drawn on parchment and philosophical concepts. So, this is like the vibrational frequency of God's existence. Right? Totally makes sense. You nod, pretending to understand, because Brother Thomas's patience for rhetorical flourishes has thinned considerably when discussing divine ratios. Historians still debate the extent to which practical musical skills were taught alongside theoretical music in medieval schools. Some argue it was entirely theoretical, while others suggest rudimentary chanting or choral skills might have been imparted. Finally, you reach astronomy, often considered the noblest of the quadrivium arts, as it deals with the celestial spheres, the movements of the planets, and the divine order of the cosmos. This isn't about gazing through a telescope. Those haven't been invented yet. Instead, you learn to observe the heavens with your naked eye, to understand the cycles of the moon and stars, and to calculate the precise timing of religious feasts like Easter, which relied heavily on astronomical tables. You study the geocentric model of the universe, where Earth is at the center, surrounded by crystalline spheres carrying the sun, moon, and planets. Ptolemy's Almagest, or its Latin versions, becomes your Bible. You learn to use instruments like the astrolabe, a complex brass disc used to measure the altitude of stars, calculate time, and determine latitude. It's a marvel of medieval technology, a miniature universe in your hands. You spend hours in the monastery courtyard at night, shivering in the cold, aligning the astrolabe to the stars, attempting to reconcile the observed movements of the heavens with the complex mathematical models in your texts. The sheer vastness of the cosmos, the intricate dance of the planets, fills you with both awe and a profound sense of your own insignificance. It's like learning complex astrophysics using only a slide rule and believing the sun revolves around your house. Still, the intellectual effort is immense. The physical demands of your education remain. The cold, the hard benches, the perpetual dim light. These are constants. But the intellectual pain intensifies. Your brain feels perpetually stretched, wrestling with concepts that are both abstract and deeply intertwined with theology. The lines between science, philosophy, and religion are blurred, and you are expected to understand all of them, to see the divine order in numbers, shapes, music, and the stars. It's exhausting, often frustrating, but undeniably enriching. Your fellow students in the quadrivium are the elite, the brightest minds who have survived the trivium. There's a deeper camaraderie now, born of shared intellectual struggle, but also a more refined competition. You challenge each other in debates, help each other with complex calculations, and sometimes, late at night, share whispered theories about the nature of the universe that might border on heresy if Brother Thomas were to overhear. These are the future scholars, the theologians, the lawyers, and the administrators of the kingdom. Your parents are bursting with pride. Letters now speak not just of hope, but of expectation. You are a promising scholar, poised for a bright future. They envision you as a respected cleric, an influential lawyer, or perhaps even a royal advisor. The pressure intensifies, a silent, weighty presence on your shoulders. Failure is not just personal, it's a profound dishonor to your lineage. As you master the quadrivium, you are transformed. You are no longer just a boy who can read Latin. You are a scholar, capable of deep thought, rigorous analysis, and sophisticated argumentation. You understand the fundamental principles that govern the universe, as understood by the greatest minds of your age. You are ready for the next stage of your life, whether that is the monastic cloister, the bustling university, or the hallowed halls of power. But first, you must endure the final, most brutal test of all the transition from student to master, from the quiet confines of the schoolroom to the unpredictable realities of the medieval world. And believe me, that transition can be truly awful. You have mastered the trivium and conquered the quadrivium. Your mind, a finely honed blade, is sharp with logic, adorned with rhetoric, and capable of understanding the mathematical and astronomical intricacies of the cosmos, as your age perceives them. You are now perhaps 17 or 18, a young man on the cusp of true scholarship, brimming with knowledge and ambition. Brother Thomas, bless his birch-wielding soul, has given you his final gruff blessing. The quiet confines of the monastic school, with its cold stone walls and predictable routine, are behind you. you are ready for the next terrifyingly liberating step university life. But be warned, my sleepy friend. If you thought the monastery was harsh, the bustling, unsanitary, and often violent academic cities of medieval Europe are about to deliver a truly rude awakening. Your journey begins, perhaps on foot, or by cart if your family is prosperous enough, heading towards one of the great centers of learning Paris. Bologna, Oxford. The roads are muddy, filled with merchants, pilgrims, and brigands. The world outside the monastery walls is loud, chaotic, and utterly overwhelming. The familiar scents of incense and beeswax are replaced by the stench of unwashed bodies, animal dung, and cheap ale. Your ears, accustomed to the solemn quiet of prayer and scholarly murmurs, are assaulted by the cacophony of 1,000 voices, street vendors hawking their wares, and the raucous laughter of drunken students. It's like stepping out of a perfectly ordered, quiet library into the wildest mosh pit you can imagine, only dirtier and with more actual medieval weapons. Arriving in the university town, you are immediately struck by its density. Buildings are crammed together, leaning precariously over narrow, winding streets. The air is thick with smoke from countless hearths and the pervasive smell of human waste. As sanitation is a concept yet to truly flourish, there are no dorms waiting for you, no friendly orientation leader. Instead, you must find lodgings, often sharing a cramped, flea-ridden room with several other students, sometimes even a stable loft. Your new bed is a straw mattress, far less comfortable than your old monastic cot, and the sounds of the city, not the quiet hum of prayer, will lull you to an uneasy sleep. University life is not cheap. Your parents, if they are still supporting you, must send funds, often through unreliable channels or with great difficulty. You learn quickly to manage your meager purse, stretching every coin for food, lodging, and the occasional, highly coveted, loaned textbook. Many students resort to begging or working odd jobs to survive, their scholarly pursuits constantly interrupted by the gnawing hunger in their bellies. This is a common historical fact. Medieval university students often face severe poverty, and begging was a recognized, if not respected, way for poor scholars to sustain their studies. Some even formed mendicant student brotherhoods. Your first taste of lectures is a shock, unlike the intimate, often one-on-one instruction with Brother Thomas. Here you are, one among hundreds, sometimes thousands, crammed into a stuffy, unheated lecture hall. The master sits elevated on a dais, often reading from a single precious manuscript, while students frantically take notes on wax tablets or precious parchment scraps. There are no printed handouts, no PowerPoint presentations. The master's voice, perhaps strained from hours of lecturing, is often indistinct, lost in the shuffling of feet, the coughs, and the occasional whispered comments from your fellow students. You strain to hear, to understand, your hand cramping from the effort of continuous writing. It's like attending a massive, disorganized online lecture. But if your internet connection was made of cobwebs and the professor was mumbling into a rusty bucket, the curriculum expands far beyond the liberal arts. You enter one of the higher faculties: theology, law, or medicine. Theology is often considered the queen of sciences, the ultimate pursuit of truth, drawing on your strong foundation in logic and rhetoric. Law is practical, leading to a lucrative career in the burgeoning legal systems of kingdoms and the church. Medicine, while still rudimentary by modern standards, offers the chance to alleviate suffering, albeit often through methods that would make you wince today. You choose your path, a momentous decision that will define your future. Your new professors, the masters, are formidable intellectuals, renowned for their wit, their knowledge, and their debating prowess. They speak Latin with a fluidity that makes your hard-won monastic Latin sound halting and clumsy. They challenge your assumptions, push you to think deeper, and expect nothing less than intellectual brilliance. You spend countless hours in the university libraries, if you're lucky enough to gain access, poring over more ancient texts, commentaries, and theological treatises. The dust of centuries settles on your tunic as you delve into the accumulated wisdom of the past. An obscure detail of medieval university life: students often formed nations or guilds based on their region of origin. These nations provided mutual support, lodging, and a sense of community in the chaotic university towns. They also often engaged in fierce rivalries, sometimes even leading to violent clashes, as students defended the honor of their nation. It was like a medieval fraternity, but with more academic brawls and fewer toga parties. Historians still debate whether these nations fostered a sense of unity or exacerbated regional tensions within the universities, acting as both support networks and sources of conflict. Student life isn't just about lectures and books. It's also about survival. University towns are hotbeds of crime and vice. Pickpockets lurk in the alleys, drunken brawls erupt in the taverns, and desperate students sometimes resort to desperate measures. You quickly learn to navigate this dangerous landscape, to avoid certain taverns, to walk with purpose, and to guard your few possessions fiercely. Your monastic innocence quickly dissipates, replaced by a streetwise pragmatism. You learn to blend in, to become invisible when necessary, and to run like the wind if trouble finds you. The intellectual environment is stimulating, but also highly competitive. You engage in informal disputations with your fellow students, honing your logical and rhetorical skills. You attend public debates, watching seasoned masters tear apart each other's arguments with impressive, often scathing, wit. The goal isn't just to learn, but to distinguish yourself, to build a reputation as a keen mind, worthy of notice by influential patrons. It's like a never-ending intellectual reality show, where every public performance could make or break your career. Despite the hardships, a different kind of camaraderie flourishes among your fellow students. You are all pursuing a common goal, enduring similar struggles. You share meager meals, discuss complex philosophical problems late into the night by flickering candlelight, and lend each other moral support when homesickness or academic frustration strikes. These bonds, forged in the crucible of medieval university life, will last a lifetime, becoming a network of future colleagues and friends who will populate the church, the courts, and the burgeoning bureaucracies. Your parents send infrequent letters, filled with a mix of pride and worry. They hear whispers of the wild student life in the city, the drinking, the brawling, the rampant disease. They implore you to stay focused, to avoid temptation, and to remember the sacrifices they have made for your education. You write back, reassuring them of your diligence, though perhaps omitting some of the more colorful details of your daily existence. You carry their hopes and the weight of your family's future on your shoulders. As you spend more years in the university, you begin to grasp the vastness of knowledge, and simultaneously, the limits of human understanding. The intellectual debates are not just about winning arguments. They are about grappling with the fundamental questions of existence, of faith, of law, and of the human condition. You are shaping your worldview, forming your own intellectual identity, even as you adhere to the established doctrines. You are becoming a master in your own right. At night, as the city hums with its restless energy, you lie awake on your hard mattress, the sounds of distant revelry and closer coughing echoing through the thin walls. Your mind, though weary, is alight with new ideas, new arguments, new questions. You are no longer just a student. You are a part of a vibrant, turbulent intellectual community. The journey is far from over. Ahead lies the ultimate challenge: becoming a master, teaching others, and applying your hard-won knowledge to the unpredictable and often brutal realities of the medieval world. And believe me, the path from student to master is often the most brutal test of all. You've survived the chaotic arrival, found your cramped lodging, and navigated the bewildering clamor of the university town. You are no longer just a student. You are now a full-fledged member of the academic throng. Perhaps 19 or 20 years old, your mind primed for the intellectual battles ahead. The dust of countless ancient texts now coats your tunic, a badge of honor, and the perpetual hum of Latin discourse fills your ears. The brutal simplicity of the monastic school is a distant memory, replaced by the sophisticated yet equally demanding world of university lectures and disputations. This is where the Socratic method gets a medieval makeover, often with much higher stakes than a mere failing grade. Your days now revolve around the lectio and the disputatio. The lectio, or lecture, is your primary means of acquiring knowledge. You wake before dawn, your straw mattress offering little comfort, and make your way through the still dark, often muddy streets to the lecture hall. These halls are vast, cold, and often unheated, packed shoulder to shoulder with hundreds, sometimes thousands of eager or exhausted students. The air is thick with the scent of damp wool, unwashed bodies, and the faint, sweet smell of beeswax candles. The master, elevated on a high dais, often reads from a single precious manuscript, a foundational text like Aristotle's Metaphysics or the sentences of Peter Lombard. There are no fancy blackboards or projectors. All knowledge flows directly from the master's lips, or from the ancient text he holds. It's like attending a TED Talk, but if the speaker was mumbling in Latin, and you had to write down every word with a quill, on expensive parchment, in the dark. Talk about a brutal note-taking system. You frantically scratch notes onto your wax tablet, then transcribe them onto parchment later, trying to capture every nuance, every subtle interpretation. The master's voice, often hoarse from hours of lecturing, blends with the constant background hum of shuffling feet, coughs, and whispered questions. You strain to hear, to understand, your hand cramping from the continuous writing. This method of learning, where the master provided the text and a literal reading of it, followed by commentary, was a common historical fact of medieval university education. It was called lectio because the master literally read the text aloud, often stopping to offer his own interpretations and clarify difficult passages. But the true intellectual heart of medieval university life lies in the disputatio. This is the medieval equivalent of a scholarly debate, a formal, highly structured, intellectual duel designed to hone logical reasoning and rhetorical skill. You attend these disputations frequently, first as an observer, then as a participant. They are held in lecture halls or sometimes in open courtyards, attracting large audiences of students, masters, and even curious townspeople. It's less like a modern academic conference and more like a high-stakes gladiatorial contest, but with words instead of swords, and often those words cut deeper than any blade. A typical disputation begins with a master posing a quaestio, a question that might be theological. Is God's existence provable by reason? Philosophical, can universals exist outside the mind? Or legal, is a promise made under duress binding? One student, the respondent, takes a position and defends it, while another, the opponent, presents counter-arguments, citing authorities and logical objections. The master then acts as the determiner, ultimately resolving the debate and offering a final, authoritative conclusion. This isn't just about winning, it's about showcasing your intellectual prowess, your mastery of logic, and your ability to defend a position under intense pressure. The disputations are rigorous, demanding quick wit and a deep understanding of the text. You learn to listen intently, to dissect an argument in real time, to spot logical fallacies faster than a knight can draw his sword. You learn to anticipate your opponent's next move, to construct your own arguments with watertight logic, and to deliver them with rhetorical flair. The verbal sparring is intense, sometimes escalating into heated exchanges, though direct personal insults were theoretically discouraged. But let's be real, humans gonna human. Imagine trying to win an argument against a room full of highly educated, Latin-speaking lawyers and philosophers, all of whom are incredibly competitive. Your modern debate club experience would feel like a friendly chat. An obscure detail about medieval disputations, while formal, they were often quite public and could be a source of entertainment. Townspeople would sometimes gather to watch the intellectual fireworks, much like attending a theatrical performance. Some masters became famous for their debating skills, drawing large crowds. It wasn't always a purely objective search for truth. There was definitely an element of intellectual performance and showmanship involved. Historians still debate the extent to which these public performances genuinely advanced knowledge versus simply reinforcing established scholastic methods. The intellectual environment is stimulating, but also fiercely competitive. Your fellow students are no longer just comrades. They are rivals for the master's attention, for the limited patronage opportunities, and for future academic positions. You form informal study groups, huddling together by flickering candlelight, whispering explanations and quizzing each other on difficult passages. These bonds are vital for survival, offering a rare sense of camaraderie in a cutthroat academic world. But even within these groups, a subtle tension exists, a constant awareness that each of you is vying for the same scarce opportunities. The physical hardships persist. Your lodging is still cramped and often cold, the food meager. Disease is a constant threat in the unsanitary city, and many students fall ill, some never to return. You learn to live with a constant state of low-level discomfort, prioritizing intellectual pursuit over physical well-being. Sleep is a luxury, often sacrificed for late-night study sessions or early morning lectures. Your body aches, your eyes burn, but your mind, fueled by ambition and the sheer thirst for knowledge, pushes you forward. You spend countless hours in the university library, a truly sacred space. Books, meticulously copied and often adorned with beautiful illuminations, are chained to lecterns to prevent theft. You run your fingers over the smooth parchment, marveling at the artistry and the knowledge contained within. You pore over ancient texts by Aristotle, Plato, Galen, and the Church Fathers, absorbing their wisdom, challenging their assumptions, and forming your own interpretations. The dust of centuries settles on your tunic as you delve into the accumulated wisdom of the past, becoming a link in the unbroken chain of scholarship. It's like having access to a secret, ancient supercomputer, but it's slow, analog, and smells faintly of sheepskin. Your parents send increasingly anxious letters. They've heard tales of the wild university life, the drinking, the brawling, the rampant disease, and perhaps the more dangerous intellectual currents that could lead to charges of heresy. They implore you to stay focused, to avoid temptation, and to remember the immense sacrifices they are making for your education. They remind you of the honor you will bring to the family, the promise of a respected career in the church or the royal courts. You write back, reassuring them of your diligence, though perhaps conveniently omitting the more colorful and dangerous aspects of your daily existence. The weight of their hopes and your family's future presses heavily upon you. As you spend more years in the university, you begin to grasp the vastness of knowledge, and simultaneously, the limits of human understanding. The intellectual debates are not just about winning arguments. They are about grappling with the fundamental questions of existence, of faith, of law, and of the human condition. You are shaping your worldview, forming your own intellectual identity. Even as you adhere to the established doctrines, you are becoming a master in your own right, preparing for your final examinations. At night, as the city hums with its restless energy, you lie awake on your hard mattress, the sounds of distant revelry and closer coughing echoing through the thin walls. Your mind, though weary, is alight with new ideas, new arguments, new questions. You are no longer just a student. You are a part of a vibrant, turbulent intellectual community. The journey is far from over. Ahead lies the ultimate challenge: becoming a master, teaching others, and applying your hard-won knowledge to the unpredictable and often brutal realities of the medieval world. And believe me, the path from student to master is often the most brutal test of all. You have ascended. You are no longer merely a student absorbing knowledge, but a vibrant, active participant in the intellectual life of the medieval university. At perhaps 21 or 22 years old, your mind is a well-oiled machine. Your Latin fluent, your logical skills razor sharp. You've mastered the art of the disputatio, able to defend or attack propositions with impressive rhetorical flair. The lectures, while still long and demanding, are now less about frantic note-taking and more about engaging with complex ideas presented by the masters. You are on the verge of becoming a master yourself, but before that, you must navigate the most perilous intellectual terrain of all theological debates, where the line between orthodoxy and heresy is razor thin, and a misstep can cost you far more than academic pride. Your days are now increasingly consumed by the study of theology, the queen of sciences. You delve deep into the sentences of Peter Lombard, a foundational theological textbook that synthesizes centuries of Christian thought. You grapple with the mysteries of the Trinity, the nature of salvation, the intricacies of sacraments, and the relationship between faith and reason. Your professors are the intellectual giants of the age, men like Thomas Aquinas or Duns Scotus, whose lectures are less about mere recitation and more about profound philosophical inquiry. They challenge you to think, to question within prescribed boundaries, of course, and to develop your own sophisticated understanding of divine truth. It's like taking a seminar where every answer could potentially lead to a papal bull of excommunication. Good luck with those citations. The disputations you participate in now are even more rigorous and, crucially, carry immense weight. These are not just academic exercises. They are public spectacles where reputations are made or shattered, and where theological doctrines are fiercely defended or subtly undermined. The questions posed are often complex and potentially controversial. Can the Immaculate Conception be proven by reason alone? What is the precise nature of transubstantiation in the Eucharist? These are not trivial questions. They touch upon the core tenets of the Church, and any deviation from accepted doctrine could have grave consequences. You learn to engage in scholastic disputation, a highly formalized method of debate. You begin by stating your position, then anticipate and address every conceivable objection, citing authorities like Augustine, Aristotle, or the Bible itself. You must be able to distinguish between different senses of a word, to employ subtle logical distinctions, and to argue with both intellectual rigor and theological precision. The stakes are higher than ever. A logical misstep could be seen as an intellectual weakness, but a theological error, however unintentional, could be interpreted as heresy. The air in the disputation hall is thick with tension, palpable enough to cut with the dull edge of a monk's tonsure. This is a common historical fact. Medieval universities, particularly Paris, were hotbeds of intellectual ferment, but also strict enforcers of orthodox doctrine. Theological error was not just a mistake, it was a spiritual and societal danger. The Church maintained a vigilant watch over academic discourse, and certain intellectual positions, even if logically sound, could lead to accusations of heresy if they challenged established dogma. Think of it as intellectual parkour, where one wrong landing could lead to a very long, very painful fall into a pit of theological fire. The threat of heresy is omnipresent. You hear whispered tales of scholars who, in their pursuit of intellectual novelty or logical consistency, strayed too far from the accepted path. Some were admonished, forced to recant their views publicly. Others faced more severe penalties, excommunication, imprisonment, or even, in the most extreme cases, the burning of their books and sometimes themselves. The fear is real, a cold knot in your stomach every time you formulate a new argument or entertain a daring thought. You learn to self-censor, to carefully phrase your arguments, to cloak potentially controversial ideas in layers of orthodox terminology. It's like being a modern-day comedian trying to push the boundaries of satire, but if the audience had direct access to the thought police and really liked bonfires. An obscure detail about medieval theological debates, one of the more unusual forms of disputation, was the disputatio de quolibet, literally, disputation about anything you please. Held annually during Advent and Lent, these were free-for-all debates where students and masters could pose any question they wished. often challenging masters with surprising and difficult queries. While ostensibly open, these too had boundaries, and pushing too hard could still invite scrutiny. It was the intellectual equivalent of an open mic night, but if the audience held your eternal salvation in their hands. Historians still debate whether these quadlibidal disputations genuinely fostered intellectual freedom or served more as a controlled release valve for academic tensions, allowing for daring questions without necessarily challenging the fundamental power structures. The physical hardships of university life continue, perhaps even more acutely. The cramped, unsanitary living conditions, the meager food, the constant threat of illness. These are your daily companions. Your sleep is still a luxury, stolen in short, fitful bursts between arduous study sessions and intense disputations. Your body aches from long hours spent hunched over texts. Your eyes burn from the dim candlelight, and a persistent cough might cling to you from the damp, cold lecture halls. But the intellectual demands now eclipse the physical discomfort. Your mind is stretched to its breaking point, wrestling with concepts that transcend human comprehension. Grappling with the very nature of God, your fellow scholars are no longer just rivals. They are fellow travelers on this dangerous path. You form deeper bonds, sharing whispered fears and doubts, offering mutual support in the face of intellectual and existential anxieties. You witness the intellectual triumphs of some and the painful recantations of others. This is a community forged in fire, bound by shared ambition and the constant threat of error. The competition remains, fierce and unrelenting, but a new understanding emerges in this high-stakes game of ideas. Your intellectual sparring partners are also your shield against the intellectual abyss. Your parents continue to write, their letters now filled with a mix of pride in your intellectual achievements and growing concern for your spiritual well-being. They hear rumors of the heated debates, the new intellectual currents, and the potential for theological missteps. They implore you to hold fast to the true faith, to avoid the temptations of novel ideas, and to remember the honor you bring to your family. You write back, reassuring them of your unwavering orthodoxy, though perhaps carefully omitting the more daring philosophical discussions that push the boundaries of accepted doctrine. The weight of their hopes and the burden of guarding your own soul press heavily upon you as you near the culmination of your theological studies. You are prepared for the final, most demanding examination, the defense of your master's thesis, or quadlibet. This is your chance to showcase your intellectual mastery, to defend your chosen theological positions against the combined might of your professors and the most brilliant students. It is the ultimate test of your logical acumen, your rhetorical skill, and your theological orthodoxy. A successful defense means becoming a master, a doctor, and gaining the right to teach others, to join the esteemed ranks of the intellectual elite. A failure means intellectual disgrace, a shattered career, and, potentially, the chilling shadow of suspicion at night. As the city falls silent, you lie awake on your hard mattress, your mind a whirlwind of theological arguments, scriptural citations, and logical syllogisms. The sounds of distant bells mark the passing hours, each chime bringing you closer to your ultimate test. You are no longer just a student, you are a philosopher, a theologian, a potential guardian of truth. The journey has been brutal, but it has forged you into something new, something powerful. The medieval world awaits your intellect, and you are ready to wield it, carefully, precisely, and always. Always with an eye on the treacherous line between orthodoxy and heresy. You have just emerged from the perilous intellectual battlegrounds of theological disputations. Your mind a forge of logical arguments and theological precision. You are on the precipice of becoming a master, a doctor, destined for the lofty halls of a university or a powerful position within the church. But let's pause for a moment, my sleepy friend, and consider a different path, one that, for the vast majority of medieval folk, represented the true education of their lives. For many, learning wasn't about Latin verbs or cosmic ratios. It was about the calloused hands, the scent of wood smoke or tanned leather, and the rhythmic clang of the hammer. For them, education looked like an apprenticeship, a hands-on, often brutal, immersion into a trade, where blisters and sawdust were far more common than books. Imagine, if you will, a different you. Perhaps you were born into a family of humble means, a peasant's son or daughter, destined for the fields from dawn till dusk. Or perhaps your family lived in a bustling town, but lacked the coin or connections for you to ever see the inside of a monastic school. For you, the path to a skill, to a livelihood, lay not through the trivium and quadrivium, but through the rigorous, unforgiving world of the guild system. You are perhaps 7 or 8 years old, your small frame still growing, but already considered old enough to begin your schooling in a very different kind of classroom. Your parents, recognizing your potential for a trade, or simply needing one less mouth to feed, have sent you to live and work with a master craftsman. This master is a member of a local guild, a powerful organization that controls trade and production within the town. Perhaps you are bound for the Weavers' Guild, the cobblers, the bakers, or, as in many medieval towns, the blacksmiths. The smell of the forge, of hot metal and coal smoke, immediately fills your nostrils, overwhelming any lingering scent of your mother's cooking. The rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil becomes the new soundtrack to your life, replacing the gentle rustle of leaves or the bleating of sheep. It's like being dropped into a medieval equivalent of a highly specialized vocational school, except you also live with your teacher, and your tuition is basically free labor for years. Your first days as an apprentice are not glamorous. You are the lowest rung on the ladder, the equivalent of a modern-day intern who also has to clean the toilets and fetch coffee. Your tasks are menial, designed to teach you humility and obedience, and to test your resolve. You sweep the workshop floor, haul heavy buckets of water from the well, feed the master's chickens, and polish tools until your arms ache. There's no formal lesson plan, no curriculum laid out on parchment. Your education is entirely hands-on, absorbed through observation and repetition. You learn by watching the master, by imitating his movements, and by enduring his sharp corrections. Imagine trying to learn how to fix a car engine by only watching a grumpy mechanic, and then getting yelled at for picking up the wrong wrench. The master, your teacher, overseer, and surrogate parent is a stern figure. He demands absolute obedience and diligent work. His discipline is often physical, a sharp cuff to the ear, a whack with a piece of leather, or a stern kick if you're particularly slow or clumsy. Mistakes are not tolerated, as they waste precious materials or, worse, reflect poorly on the master's reputation. You learn quickly that precision and careful attention to detail are paramount. Your fingers, once soft, begin to toughen, developing blisters that quickly turn into calluses. The constant dull ache in your muscles becomes a familiar companion. This is a common historical fact. Apprenticeship agreements often explicitly granted masters the right to physically discipline their apprentices. It was seen as a necessary part of the training, instilling discipline and diligence. Historians still debate the extent of this physical discipline. Was it simply strict, or was it often abusive? The truth likely varied widely from master to master. Your living conditions are basic, often sleeping on a straw pallet in a corner of the workshop, or in a small attic room shared with other apprentices. Food is simple, often consisting of coarse bread, cheese, and weak ale. Meat is a rarity. You work from dawn till dusk, 7 days a week, with only holy days offering a brief respite. Sundays are for church, not for leisure. Your childhood, if it ever truly began, is definitively over. You gradually progress from menial tasks to more direct involvement in the trade. If you are learning blacksmithing, you might begin by pumping the bellows, controlling the heat of the forge. Then you'll learn to hammer hot metal, starting with simple tasks like shaping nails or making hooks. Your arms develop a surprising strength. Your muscles ripple under your tunic, and your hands, once awkward, begin to move with a precise, practiced grace. The heat of the forge is intense. The sparks fly, and the clang of metal against metal is deafening. But you learn to work within this environment, to read the colors of the heated iron, to feel the subtle vibrations of the hammer blow. It's like learning to operate heavy machinery by actually operating it, with no safety manual and a very unforgiving teacher. An obscure detail about medieval apprenticeships: some apprentices, particularly in the later Middle Ages, might have had a small, formal indenture or contract outlining the terms of their service, including the duration of the apprenticeship, often 7 to 12 years. The master's obligations: food, lodging, training, and the apprentice's duties. This was a significant step towards formalizing vocational education, but it also legally bound the apprentice to the master for a long period. Historians still debate the prevalence and enforceability of these contracts, particularly for the poorest apprentices. Your formal education, beyond the trade, is minimal. You might learn rudimentary reading and writing, perhaps enough to keep simple accounts for the master, or to read basic religious texts. Your lessons are practical, not theoretical. There are no Latin conjugations, no philosophical debates. Your knowledge is rooted in the physical world, in the properties of materials, the mechanics of tools, and the intricate processes of your chosen craft. You learn about quality control through direct experience, understanding that shoddy work will lead to unhappy customers and a damaged reputation for the master. It's about getting it right, not just understanding why it's right. You form bonds with your fellow apprentices, sharing whispered jokes and commiserating over the master's latest outburst. These are your new family, bound by shared hardship and the common goal of one day becoming a skilled journeyman, and eventually, a master yourself. You might sneak out after dark to visit the local tavern, risking the master's wrath for a taste of cheap ale and a moment of fleeting freedom. These small acts of rebellion are your way of asserting your individuality in a life rigorously controlled by your master. Your parents, if they are still alive and in contact, might visit occasionally, bringing a small token of affection or a fresh piece of bread. They are proud of your progress, of the skill you are acquiring, knowing that it ensures your future livelihood. They see you as a testament to their foresight, a son or daughter who will not be tied to the land like they were, but will have a respectable place in the burgeoning urban economy. You feel the weight of their expectations. A different kind of burden than that of a scholar, but a burden nonetheless. As the years pass, you move from apprentice to journeyman. This is a significant step, marking the end of your formal apprenticeship. As a journeyman, you are free to travel from town to town, working for various masters, honing your skills, and experiencing different techniques. You carry a certificate from your master, a letter of recommendation, which is your passport to employment. It's like graduating from a vocational college and entering the workforce. But if your degree was a handwritten note and you had to walk everywhere to find a job, this period of travel and varied experience was a common historical practice, allowing journeymen to gain diverse skills before settling down to become a master. The journeyman life offers a taste of freedom, a chance to see the wider world beyond your hometown. You learn new techniques, meet different people, and broaden your understanding of your craft. But it also comes with its own hardships. Finding work can be difficult. Wages are often low, and lodging is still basic. You are always on the move, always looking for the next opportunity, always trying to prove your worth. Eventually, if you are skilled enough, save enough coin, and gain the approval of the guild, you will aspire to become a master yourself. This involves creating a masterpiece, a complex and finely crafted example of your skill that demonstrates your complete mastery of the trade. If your masterpiece is approved by the guild, you can open your own workshop, take on your own apprentices, and become a respected member of the community. This is the ultimate goal, the culmination of years of hard labor, blisters, and sawdust. It's like finally getting your own successful startup after years of working for others. But if your final product was a perfectly hammered horseshoe, and your investors were a council of grumpy old artisans, at night, as you lie on your straw pallet in a strange town, your body aching from a long day's work, you might dream not of Latin phrases, but of the rhythmic clang of your own hammer in your own forge, of the satisfying scent of finished wood, or the smooth feel of a perfectly woven fabric. Your education has been brutal, practical, and undeniably effective. It has shaped your hands, your muscles, and your very understanding of the world. You are a product of medieval vocational education, forged in fire, disciplined by hard work, and ready to contribute to the physical fabric of your age. You've explored the rigorous academic world of monastic schools and universities, and even the demanding, calloused hand education of guilds. But let's now turn our gaze to a largely overlooked corner of medieval learning, a path taken by a significant, though often unrecorded portion of the population, women. Forget the grand lecture halls or the smoky forges. For you, as a young woman in the Middle Ages, education looked very different, often more secluded and intensely practical, preparing you for roles that, while vital, were rarely celebrated in the same academic light as those of your male counterparts. Imagine you are a girl, perhaps just past the age of reason, around 7 or 8 years old. Your future is not in a university, nor is it likely in a bustling guild workshop. Though some women certainly worked alongside their husbands or fathers in trades, instead, your education begins in the home, within the confines of your family's manor, your village, or perhaps if your family is particularly devout or well-connected, a convent. The smell of fresh bread, herbs, and beeswax candles often fills your nose, blending with the faint scent of wool and damp earth. This is your classroom, and your teachers are primarily your mother, older sisters, or the nuns of your order. It's a far cry from the Latin chanting, switch-wielding monk. Isn't it more like a domestic boot camp, focused on skills that ensure the household, and perhaps your soul runs smoothly? Your earliest lessons are practical, woven into the fabric of daily life. You learn the rhythms of the household spinning wool, weaving cloth, mending garments, preparing meals, preserving food for the long winter months. Your small fingers, at first clumsy, gradually become adept at handling needles, spindles, and cooking tools. You learn about herbs and their medicinal properties from your mother, how to treat simple ailments, how to mix poultices for a fever or a sprain. This is essential knowledge for managing a household, for caring for children, and for sustaining the health of your family. Imagine learning how to be a combination of a chef, seamstress, doctor, and general manager, all before you hit puberty. And no YouTube tutorials. For girls of the nobility, or those in wealthier merchant families, literacy might also be part of your education. You might learn to read, primarily to access religious texts like the Psalter or Books of Hours, which contain prayers and devotional readings. Writing, however, is less common, often reserved for scribes or men of affairs. If you do learn to write, it might be a simple, functional script, enough to keep household accounts or manage correspondence. You practice your letters with a stylus on a wax tablet, or perhaps, if you are very fortunate, on a precious piece of parchment. Your mother or a household chaplain might guide you, patiently correcting your hand. It's a selective literacy, driven by practical and spiritual needs, rather than broad intellectual curiosity. This is a common historical fact, while universal literacy was not a goal in the Middle Ages for either gender. Aristocratic and wealthy urban women often achieved a degree of literacy, primarily for religious devotion and household management. Their education was almost always private, occurring within the home or a convent, as public schools were exclusively for boys. Beyond practical skills and rudimentary literacy, you are immersed in religious instruction. You learn prayers, hymns, and the basic tenets of Christian faith. You hear stories from the Bible, tales of saints and martyrs, which shape your moral compass and understanding of the world. Piety is a central virtue for women, and your education emphasizes humility, obedience, and devotion. You might spend hours in quiet contemplation, memorizing lengthy passages from the scriptures, or practicing your catechism. Your spiritual education is as vital, if not more so, than any practical skill. If your family chooses the convent path for you, your education becomes more formal, yet still distinct from a male monastic school. You might enter as an oblate, a child committed to monastic life, or as a novice, a young woman preparing to take vows. In the convent, your days are structured around prayer, communal work, and spiritual study. You learn to read and sing the liturgy, to copy manuscripts, a rare but significant opportunity for some nuns, and to understand the theological doctrines of the Church. Some convents were renowned centers of learning, producing scholars and artists, though these were exceptions rather than the rule. Imagine attending a boarding school where the curriculum is 80% religious studies and 20% domestic chores, with a lifetime commitment attached, an obscure detail about medieval women's education, while often limited. Noble women sometimes learned skills considered courtly, such as playing musical instruments like the harp or lute, singing, dancing, and even basic elements of falconry or hunting. These were not academic pursuits in the scholastic sense, but rather social graces that befitted their status and could make them more attractive marriage prospects. Historians still debate the extent to which these skills were formally taught versus informally acquired, and how much they truly constituted an education beyond mere accomplishment. Your interactions with other girls are different too. In the home, you learned sibling dynamics, the quiet hierarchies of the household. In a convent, you live communally with other nuns and novices, forming close bonds of sisterhood. You share tasks, support each other in spiritual endeavors, and navigate the occasional squabbles that arise in any shared living situation. These relationships are your world, your entire social circle, far removed from the boisterous, often violent, male-dominated university towns. The quiet camaraderie of shared prayer and common purpose replaces the intellectual sparring of the disputation hall. The discipline in your education is less about the switch and more about strict adherence to social norms and religious doctrine. A misstep in household duties might earn a sharp word from your mother. A lapse in piety in the convent might lead to extra prayers or quiet reflection. The consequences are often social or spiritual rather than physical, though physical hardship in daily life is a constant for everyone in the Middle Ages, regardless of gender or social standing. As you grow older, your education continues to evolve, shaped by your social class and future role. If you are a peasant girl, your education deepens in agricultural knowledge, how to tend crops, milk cows, churn butter, and prepare meals that sustain a family through meager harvests. Your hands become strong and calloused, your body accustomed to hard labor. Your knowledge is rooted in the earth, in the cycles of nature, and in the traditions passed down through generations. If you are a noble woman, your practical education might include managing a large household, overseeing servants, maintaining inventories, and understanding the complex social etiquette of court life. You learn about diplomacy through observation, how to entertain important guests, and how to represent your family with grace and dignity. Your literacy, if you possess it, becomes a tool for managing estates and corresponding with other noble families. Your education is designed to make you a capable mistress of a manor, a suitable wife, and a valuable asset to your family's social and political standing. The limitations of your education are clear. You will not attend university. You will not study advanced philosophy, law, or medicine in a formal setting. Your knowledge of Latin will likely remain rudimentary, enough for prayer, but not for complex theological debate. Your world is smaller, more confined, but no less essential. You are educated for your specific role in society, a role that, while often behind the scenes, is fundamental to the functioning of medieval life. At night, as you lie on your simple bed, whether it's a straw pallet in a peasant's cottage, a feather mattress in a manor house, or a hard cot in a convent cell, you might dream of the skills you are honing: the perfect stitch, the rising doe, the healing poultice, the beautifully illuminated prayer book. Your education, though different, is just as rigorous, just as demanding, and just as crucial to your survival and prosperity in the medieval world. It shapes your hands, your spirit, and your understanding of your place in God's ordered universe. You are a product of medieval women's education, practical, pious, and prepared for your unique, vital role. You have endured the cold stone floors, the sting of the birch switch, the bewildering complexities of Latin grammar, the arduous logic disputations, and the chaotic, unsanitary whirl of university life all are behind you. You stand now as a fully formed medieval scholar, your mind sharpened to a keen edge, your soul steeped in the wisdom of the ancients and the church fathers. You are perhaps in your mid-20s, a master, a doctor, a man, or in rare cases, a woman of profound learning. But what becomes of a medieval scholar once their brutal education finally concludes? This is the final, often unpredictable chapter of your journey life after learning. Whether as a respected master, a humble monk, or a wandering mendicant, your path now diverges, dictated by your chosen faculty and the capricious hand of fate. If you chose theology, the queen of sciences, and successfully defended your thesis, you likely remain within the hallowed halls of the university as a master or doctor of theology. Your days, though no longer spent as a student, are still rigorously academic. You now stand on the high dais where once your own masters lectured, delivering your own lectionnaires to hundreds of eager or perhaps equally exhausted students. Your voice, now seasoned by years of disputation, fills the vast, cold lecture hall as you dissect complex theological texts. Guide your students through the labyrinthine arguments of Aquinas or Scotus, and perhaps even publish your own commentaries or summas. Imagine having a job where your main duty is to argue with extremely smart people about the nature of angels for 8 hours a day. Sounds like a blast. Right. Your intellectual life is vibrant but demanding. You engage in weekly disputations, now as the determiner, guiding the debate, correcting logical fallacies, and ultimately pronouncing the authoritative conclusion. These are your opportunities to showcase your wisdom, to defend orthodoxy, and to subtly advance your own intellectual positions. You are expected to write, to contribute to the growing body of scholastic literature, and to defend your work against the criticisms of your peers. The academic rivalries are intense, often spilling over into personal animosities, as scholars vie for patronage, influence, and the prestigious chairs of their faculties. You are a respected intellectual, but also a political player within the university, navigating alliances and rivalries with the cunning of a seasoned diplomat. However, the shadow of heresy still looms. In your pursuit of truth, you must always be mindful of the boundaries of orthodox doctrine. A bold new interpretation, a seemingly logical conclusion that deviates from accepted church teaching, could lead to accusations, censure, or worse. You learn to phrase your arguments with exquisite precision, to employ layers of nuance, and to always conclude with an affirmation of your unwavering faith. Even if your underlying logic skirts dangerously close to the edge, historians still fiercely debate whether the rigid theological framework of medieval universities stifled genuine intellectual inquiry, or whether it actually forced scholars to be more intellectually rigorous in their defense of orthodoxy. It's a bit like trying to innovate within a highly regulated industry. You can still be brilliant, but you better know the rules backwards and forwards. If your path led to the faculty of law, your future likely lies in the burgeoning legal systems of the kingdom or the church. You might become a royal advisor, a judge in a secular court, or an ecclesiastical lawyer, advising bishops or even the Pope himself. Your days are filled with drafting legal documents in precise Latin, interpreting complex statutes, and judging disputes based on Roman law, canon law, or customary law. Your keen logical mind, honed by years of disputation, makes you invaluable in disentangling complex legal arguments and rendering reasoned judgments. The rewards are often substantial, comfortable living, influence, and a respected place in society. It's like being a top-tier corporate lawyer. But if your precedents were ancient Roman scrolls and your clients were literal kings and popes, no pressure. This path, however, also has its perils. Politics is a constant companion in the courts of kings and bishops. You find yourself entangled in the intricate web of alliances and rivalries, where a misstep can lead to loss of favor, banishment, or even a more permanent, fatal end. You learn to speak carefully, to weigh your words, and to navigate the treacherous currents of court intrigue. You might be forced to make moral compromises, to defend a client you believe to be guilty, or to uphold a law you deem unjust, all in the name of your position and your family's security. An obscure detail about medieval legal education: some legal scholars, especially those trained in canon law, were called glossators, as they produced extensive glosses or marginal commentaries on legal texts, effectively shaping and interpreting the law through their scholarly work. It was essentially early legal precedent setting through detailed annotation. Should your studies have been in medicine, your destiny is to alleviate suffering, albeit with tools that might seem rudimentary to a modern eye. You might become a physician to a wealthy lord, a monk in an infirmary, or an urban practitioner, serving the common folk. Your days are spent examining urine for diagnostic clues, bleeding patients with leeches, prescribing herbal remedies, and performing basic surgical procedures. Your education in the quadrivium, particularly astronomy, helps you understand the influence of the stars on bodily humors, a common belief in medieval medicine. You are a figure of authority and respect, often the only hope for many afflicted by disease. It's like being a country doctor in a time before antibiotics, where your best tool is often just hope and a good bedside manner. Well, at least I won't have to deal with demanding patients asking for a second opinion from WebMD. You might chuckle to yourself. However, medieval medicine is fraught with limitations. The understanding of anatomy and pathology is rudimentary, and many common diseases are incurable. You witness immense suffering, and despite your best efforts, many of your patients succumb to illness. The failures weigh heavily on your soul, and the constant exposure to disease makes you vulnerable yourself. Historians still debate the true effectiveness of medieval medical practices, while some treatments were rooted in superstition or incorrect theories. Others, particularly herbal remedies and basic hygiene practices, had genuine efficacy. But what if you didn't become a master or a powerful cleric or physician? For some, the journey of learning led to a quieter, more contemplative life. You might enter a monastery, becoming a monk, dedicating your life to prayer, contemplation, and scholarly pursuits within the cloister. Your days are structured by the monastic rule matins: lauds, prime, terce, sext, none. Vespers, compline, each hour marked by prayer and communal service. You spend long hours in the scriptorium, copying ancient manuscripts, preserving knowledge, and perhaps even creating your own beautiful illuminated texts. Your intellectual skills, honed at university, are now put to the service of God and the preservation of Christian learning. This is a common historical fact. Monasteries were crucial centers for the preservation and transmission of knowledge throughout the early and high Middle Ages. Serving as vital cultural reservoirs, life in the cloister offers peace and a sense of purpose. But it also demands strict discipline and isolation from the outside world. You renounce worldly possessions and personal ambitions, dedicating yourself to humility and obedience. The monotony can be challenging, the temptations of the flesh or the world outside constantly testing your resolve. But within the quiet walls, you find a profound connection to God and a deep satisfaction in the pursuit of divine truth. It's like joining a spiritual think tank, where the only goal is eternal salvation and the biggest drama is whether the new parchment batch is up to snuff. And then, there is the path of the mendicant or wandering scholar. Perhaps you failed to secure a stable position, or perhaps you chose a life of intellectual freedom, untethered by institutional constraints. You travel from town to town, relying on charity and the generosity of patrons, exchanging your knowledge for a meal or a place to sleep. You might lecture informally in town squares, engaging in public disputations with local clerics, or offering your services as a scribe or tutor. Your life is one of insecurity, poverty, and constant movement, but also one of intellectual adventure. You are a walking, talking library, bringing knowledge to those who might otherwise never encounter it. It's like being a traveling university lecturer, but without the salary, the benefits, or, regular meals. This path is difficult. You face suspicion from established authorities who might view your independent scholarship as a threat to orthodoxy. You endure hunger, cold, and the constant indignity of begging. But you also experience a unique freedom, unbound by the politics of court or cloister. Your only master is truth, and your only obligation is to seek it wherever it may lead, and to share it with anyone who will listen. An obscure detail some wandering scholars were known as goliards, a term sometimes associated with vagabond clerks and students who wrote satirical Latin poetry, often criticizing the church and society. They represented a more rebellious, less orthodox side of medieval intellectual life. Historians still debate the exact nature and extent of goliardic activity. Were they widespread, organized groups, or more isolated figures of rebellion? Ultimately, your life as a medieval scholar, regardless of the specific path you take, is marked by the enduring legacy of your education. You are a product of a system that was rigorous, demanding, and often brutal, but also profoundly influential. You are a guardian of knowledge, a shaper of thought, and a contributor to the intellectual and spiritual fabric of your age. Whether you are advising a king, comforting the sick, leading a monastery, or teaching in a dusty town square, your mind, forged in the crucible of medieval learning, continues to work, to question, to analyze, and to seek truth in a world that often seems anything but rational. At night, as you lie on your bed, be it a soft mattress in a bishop's palace, a hard cot in a monastery cell, or a straw pallet in a humble inn, your mind is still active. The echoes of Latin phrases, the logic of a complex argument, the patterns of the stars, they all play in your thoughts. You have lived a life of the mind, a life shaped by the pursuit of knowledge, and as you drift off to sleep, you carry the weight and the wonder of that extraordinary journey with you. The Middle Ages may have been awful in many ways, but for you, the scholar, it was a world endlessly fascinating and intellectually rich. Now, you can slowly open your eyes. Your warm room is embracing you, and the sound of the fan is still blowing gently, bringing a cool breeze. The cold stone walls of the monastery school, the heated academic debates in the university lecture halls, and the smell of burning wood in the workshop are all far away. Just a faint echo in your mind. You have been on a long and arduous journey with a medieval scholar, witnessing the tireless dedication to knowledge, the struggles within the academic world, and the life-shaping choices. The story of medieval education is not just a dry history page. It is a story of the resilience of human will in the quest for knowledge, of the limitations of the times, and of how women, even though they were not allowed to go to public schools, still found their own path to education. Perhaps when you hear this story, you realize that our lives today, despite the pressures and challenges, still contain countless freedoms and choices in learning and developing ourselves that people in ancient times never had. Cherish these peaceful moments. Cherish the freedom to access knowledge, and cherish the opportunities for you to shape your own future. Let the whispering of the fan lull you into a deep sleep. All the worries, all the sorrows of the scholars, craftsmen, and women of the Middle Ages have now disappeared into the night. Rest assured that what you have just experienced is just a story from the distant past, a lesson in perseverance and passion for knowledge. As you fall asleep, know that you are lying in warmth and safety, centuries away from the harshness of the Middle Ages. Everything is okay.